Welcome to News West 9's West Texas View with Johnny Lou Avery.
This is the third in our series of programs about organ donor, the need for organ donors, and it's so important to make you aware, and that's what we've tried to do over the last 2 Sundays and we'll do today. And today's program is going to be the recipient and the donor meeting together and telling their story together, and and what it meant to both families, and since then what it has meant. But the important thing is to recap what we talked about the last 2 Sundays. There is living donors and deceased donors, and Jim Shoemaker was a living donor to Linda McLean, who was desperate for a kidney, desperate to live, and her husband, who had the forethought to share this information because they hadn't been able to find a match within the family, and nor was there, most people have to wait 4 to 5 years to get a organ transplant. And so her time was running out. And so he started telling. He told at church, he told at work. Well, one day, one of the co-workers who barely knew Linda said, "I'll donate my kidney." He was 68 years old at the time. And so he didn't even know he'd match. He knew he had the same blood type because he was a regular blood donor. And so they went through the process, and that's what Jim Shoemaker talked about last time, was how he went through this process and got the best examination. Did not cost him anything. The insurance of the recipient paid for everything. So then he went through the donation process, and they took it from his body and put it in her body, and immediately it started working. And he had very little after effects of taking that kidney out of his body adjusted, and then everything was back to normal for both families. They both have kept working. But a really amazing thing happened. Because they knew who was the donor and the recipient, their families became close friends. And Linda, I want to start with you, and you tell what this has meant.
Okay, and before I say that, before I get into how much Jim means to me and to our family, I want to thank you for letting us share and tell how important it is, because it's so important to share your experience and what this has done to our lives and what it can do to other people's lives. So we want to thank you for letting us do this. I mean, it's
I think
a blessing.
It's so important for us to be aware, and so few people are aware.
Yes, so people are aware. I had gotten so sick. I could have, with different ways of dialysis, I could have survived on dialysis, but my life would have been so limited, I couldn't, really enjoy my family. With 6 kids, and 14 grandkids, there's a lot to enjoy. And then Jim Shoemaker came into our lives, and I didn't even know him. He didn't really know me.
And he was willing to step forward and say, I'm doing this. And one of the things she said is, I didn't overthink the process. I just knew that she needed one, and I had an extra one, and I was going to give it. Because you are naturally a giving person.
A giving person.
But then, after this process, your family just immediately adopted Jim and Charlene, his wife.
Yes.
And they put together this scrapbook. Tell about the scrapbook. Or you tell about the scrapbook. Tell what that meant to you.
I can't believe I didn't bring it with me today. It's such a beautiful thing, and it is a...
They lovingly put it together because I saw it.
Yes.
And
it is such a thing. I read it this past week again, and it's just amazing how each of her kids and her grandkids wrote a letter in there, and there are pictures of all of their family in there, and talking about the impact that it made. The problem with so many people who have kidney disease and issues with the kidneys is it does restrict everything in their life. They just cannot function normally. And particularly can't do things like taking family vacations, which we take for granted so often, and you know,
or have the energy to go out
Have
to
the
eat
energy to go out.
in the evening when you've gone to work all day.
yeah, and just going and doing things, and to hear them talk about the fact that they can get together now and they can go to Florida and have a family vacation, or they can go down to the Texas Gulf Coast and have a
Or
vacation
go watch
together.
a child play.
And all of them get to be together. It's just a wonderful thing, and it's a great excuse for us about once every month to go out to Outback and have a steak together. And,
Right, exactly. Share what's going on in our lives.
Enjoy being together. And
But one of the children in that scrapbook wrote, and this just jumped out at me, I thank God every day for Jim Shoemaker because he gave my mother the gift of life.
And that's basically exactly what he did, because my life had become so restricted, and now, you know, we can go, we can travel. It's just amazing what
are
he
you
has
still
done.
working?
I'm still working. I
Okay.
work part-time, but I'm still working, and we go on weekends to see our grandkids, whether it's sports or whatever. And Jim and Charlene have just become, I mean, they're
Part of the family.
They're part of our family because they did give our family new hope and new life. And I don't know what we'd have done without them. And there were all other people where I work at Tennyson Oil, where Jim and my husband Jim work at Concho Supply. And those people supported us by letting us be off work, letting us, you know, they let Jim and both Jims take off work as they needed to, and
even to come to do this television program because they know how important this story is.
Right, and there's so many people out there, and I want other people to have the blessing that I have with Jim Shoemaker.
Well, we've got to take a break now, but when we come back, I want you to tell your reaction when your husband came home and said, I found you a donor, and you barely know him, but we'll be back in just a minute and continue this conversation.
Stay tuned. West Texas View will be right back.